It is the biggest question most rail fans never ask. How did the most iconic car on American railroads vanish almost overnight? Once, 34,000 bright red Cabooses kept crews safe, and entire towns watched for the conductor in the cupola. Today, a cheap metal box has replaced an entire way of life, and the real reason reveals a collision of danger, invention, and a $381 million decision. So why did the Caboose actually disappear? The answer starts with the risks no one else could see. On the muddy tracks of upstate New York in the 1840s, a conductor named Nat Williams had nowhere to work but the open air. Paperwork piled up, lanterns and flags needed a place to go, so Williams commandeered an empty boxcar, wedged in a crude wooden box for a seat, and set up a barrel as his desk. He called it a rolling office, but what he built was the first American caboose. At first, these makeshift shelters were little more than shanties on wheels, just enough to keep the wind and rain off the conductor and the brakemen as they bounced from town to town. Rail traffic grew, and the demands on crews multiplied. By the 1850s, railroads like Union Pacific were assigning dedicated cars to protect workers from the elements and keep operations running smoothly, especially on remote stretches. The early cabooses were rough, some with just 4 wheels, earning the nickname bobbers for their jarring ride. Ohio banned those in 1913 after too many injuries. 8-wheel versions soon took over, offering a steadier ride and more space for bunks, stoves, and tools. A breakthrough came in 1863, when T.B. Watson, a conductor on the Chicago and Northwestern, faced a problem. He could not see the length of his train from the crowded, windowless boxcar. Watson cut a hole in the roof and built a small platform above, the first cupola. From this perch, he could scan for shifting loads, broken couplers, or the telltale smoke of a hot bearing. The cupola quickly became standard, turning the caboose into a kind of lookout tower on wheels. By the 1870s, new cabooses rolled out of shops with built-in cupolas, their signature shape instantly recognizable across the country. Inside, the caboose evolved too. Conductors filled every corner with ledgers, signal flags, and lanterns. Brakemen rested on bunks between stops, heating coffee on a cast-iron stove. Over time, railroads added kitchens and even bathrooms, making the caboose a second home for crews who might spend more nights on the rails than at home. Each railroad painted their cabooses in bold colors, bright red for many, but also greens and blues, turning the last car into a moving billboard and a signal to anyone watching trackside. Every design change, from the first rough shelter to the high cupola, answered a single need: keep the crew safe, keep the train moving, and give the railroad a way to see trouble before disaster struck. But as trains grew longer and technology advanced, the dangers and the solutions would only get more complicated. Danger rode every mile with the early freight crews. Before automatic air brakes, stopping a train meant sending brakemen out along the tops of moving cars, day or night, in rain, sleet, or blinding snow. One slip on an icy ladder or a sudden jolt could send a man tumbling to the tracks below. Broken limbs, crushed hands, and worse were common. The caboose was more than a shelter. It was a lifeline, a place to regroup after risking everything to keep the train under control. By the 1880s, the Brotherhood of Railroad Trainmen had formed in a Delaware and Hudson caboose, uniting workers who faced these hazards together. Their union became a force for safer working conditions, pushing for better breaks and fairer hours, but the risks never really left the rails. The caboose itself became a kind of badge. Railroads painted them in vivid colors: fire engine red, deep greens, bright blues, each car a rolling billboard for its company and a beacon for trackside towns. Logos and reporting marks stood out in bold type, turning the last car into a symbol recognized from New England to the Pacific coast. Kids waved as cabooses rolled past, and photographers waited to capture the splash of color against a gray landscape. By the 1920s, nearly 34,000 cabooses traveled American rails. Each one carried the marks of the crews who lived and worked inside. A battered stove, a patched bunk, a favorite lantern hung by the window. The cupola or bay window was the lookout, but the heart of the caboose was the sense of shared purpose. Conductors and brakemen watched over their train, their lives tied to every mile of track. The caboose was their office, their home, their shield against the dangers that came with every run. But for all its tradition and color, the caboose had to do more than just look the part. It had to keep its crew safe, provide a clear view of the train, and serve as a mobile command post. As trains grew longer and heavier, the challenge became clear. Any new system would have to match the caboose's record for safety and reliability, or crews would never trust it. The stakes were measured in lives, not just in miles or minutes. For decades, the caboose stood as proof that the railroad valued both its people and its image, and for a time, nothing else could take its place. Infrared beams scan each axle as a freight train thunders over a trackside hotbox detector. These sensors, first installed in the 1950s and refined over decades, read the temperature of every bearing, comparing each to its neighbors and to the day's ambient heat. If a single axle runs hot, signaling a failing bearing or a stuck brake, the detector flags the exact car and axle, alerting the crew by radio before a fire or derailment can start. By the 1980s, these detectors had become a silent line of defense, watching for danger day and night, unaffected by fog, snow, or darkness. But temperature was not the only thing that needed watching. The last car still had to prove the train was whole, its brakes holding steady. In 1969, the Florida East Coast Railway ran a bold experiment, removing cabooses entirely and mounting a compact metal box on the rear coupler. This first end-of-train device became known to crews as Fred, and it tapped directly into the brake pipe. Inside, a pressure sensor measured the air in the line. A motion detector checked whether the last car was rolling or stopped. Signals traveled by radio, sending live telemetry to a small screen in the locomotive. The engineer could see at a glance if the brakes were charged at the rear or if the train had come apart. If the worst happened, a command from the cab could trigger the device to dump air and slam the brakes at both ends of the train. Modern end-of-train devices weigh less than 30 pounds and run for days on a charge. They beam back a steady stream of data: brake pipe pressure, motion, battery status, and even GPS location. The system is standardized across North America, so any locomotive can talk to any ETD, no matter the railroad. With every mile, these devices quietly replace the eyes, ears, and hands that once rode in the cupola, matching every safety function the caboose once performed. But with silicon, sensors, and radio waves, telemetry has become the new lookout. By 1980, every mile a caboose rolled cost the railroad 92 cents. Multiply that by millions of miles each year, and the numbers ballooned fast. Cabooses did not haul freight, did not generate revenue, and everyone needed fuel, maintenance, and a crew member on the payroll. In the boardrooms and accounting offices, the math was relentless. One terminal superintendent in Texas figured skipping caboose switches alone saved $300 a day per terminal. Multiply that across the country, and the industry's annual savings soared into the hundreds of millions. When the Lewiston Morning Tribune reported that railroads could save about $381 million every year by retiring cabooses, it was not just a headline, it was a warning shot. The old arguments about safety and tradition had lost their edge. Hotbox detectors and end-of-train devices did the job with silicon and sensors, not coffee and kerosene. Labor agreements in the 1980s dropped crew sizes from 5 to 2, and motel rooms replaced the rolling bunkhouse. The caboose, once a symbol of the railroad's human side, now looked like a financial anchor. But one thing still stood in the way: State laws. For over a century, states like Virginia required cabooses on every freight train. That changed on July 1st, 1988, when Virginia repealed its last mandatory caboose statute. Overnight, the legal barrier vanished. Railroads wasted no time. Cabooses vanished from mainline freights, replaced by a 30-pound box of electronics bolted to the rear coupler. The final decision was not poetic. It was practical, decisive, and impossible to argue with. Efficiency had won, and the era of the caboose was over. Automation now rides where tradition once lingered. Today, sensors and blinking lights keep watch. They save railroads hundreds of millions of dollars each year. But as efficiency reshapes every journey, the question remains: what else do we trade away, unseen, for progress? Share your thoughts below and join the conversation.